What's up, everybody? Back with another episode of That Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a little while since I have, made a new episode. Was working on some things. Life took me on, a little bit of a ride for a little bit, but we're starting to get back to some normalcy. Anyway, so my first topic today on That Sports Podcast is Jake Paul, the Rahman Jr. fight is canceled. Now, Jake Paul is saying that Rahman Jr. was, isn't going to make weight, and he's been making a big deal about the weight and saying that the weight is the reason that he cut the fight, canceled the fight. Rahman Jr. says that, that's bullshit, essentially that, his body wouldn't let him get down to 200, so he was asking for some an allotment, some extra weight and stuff like that. Now, in all the years I've been watching pro fighting, I haven't seen very many fights get canceled because a fighter didn't make weight. That's both across boxing and MMA. I can't name a lot of instances where a professional fight was canceled because the fighter didn't make weight. So my question is if he really is blaming the weight, how much was Rahman Jr. asking for? What, like 5-10 pounds? You can give away 5 or 10 pounds in boxing. It might, impact the strength difference a little bit and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean the fight's going to be lopsided. Even in mixed martial arts, there are fighters who have missed weight and stuff like that by a couple of pounds, and they still wanted the fight to go on. So, I think it's a load of shit. Dana White also believes it's a load of shit. He says that it's probably the lack of ticket sales is why they canceled the fight. Madison, I believe it was supposed to be held at Madison Square Garden, I believe it's more to do with the lack of ticket sales and Jake Paul ducking an opponent, rather making an excuse to duck an opponent rather than carry on with the fight. This is the second fight in a row against actual boxers that Jake Paul that's been canceled. So I do find it mighty convenient. If Jake Paul wanted that Tommy Fury fight to happen, all he had to do was move the venue to overseas to where Tommy Fury could fight, right? If he wanted to really fight Rahman Jr., he could have gave him the allotment for the weight, you know what I mean? Or he could have let him, go out the week and see how much weight he could cut this upcoming week leading up to the fight. But like I said, I believe personally it's the lack of ticket sales, and it's a convenient excuse for Jake Paul to duck out of the fight. These are the toughest two fighters in his career so far, and that's not to take away anything from Tyron Woodley or Ben Askren. Ben Askren was a fantastic grappler, but let's be honest, the reason he got bounced out of the UFC was because he's not an elite level striker. He's not. Sure, he can box, but so can a lot of other people. A lot of people can box. Doesn't mean they're going to be world-class boxers. Doesn't mean they're going to be able to get into a boxing ring and hold their own, especially against someone who's significantly younger. I believe Ben Askren was up in his 30s. Jake Paul hasn't even reached his late 20s yet. So you're talking about an age difference, that definitely does come into play, especially again in that scenario. And then Tyron Woodley was almost 40, if not 40, when he fought Jake Paul both times. And Jake Paul is almost half his age. So you're talking about a guy who's pretty much falling out of his prime in mixed martial arts, going into boxing and stuff like that, thinking he can take on this youngster. Like I said, and that's not to say that, Tyron Woodley maybe back in his mid 20s to late 20s wouldn't have, fought better against Jake Paul, but again, Tyron Woodley got bounced out of the UFC because he wasn't cutting the mustard anymore. He was getting, I think he got out of his last 4 or 5 fights, he got knocked out 3 or 4 times or something like that. So it's he wasn't performing very well, and then he got knocked out by Jake Paul, just giving me more confirmation that his time in combat sports might be winding down, and he might need to find something else to do. So, him Jake Paul not wanting to fight Tommy Fury, somebody who's been training in boxing, who's really a boxer, and Rahman Jr., same thing. These guys are real boxers. They've been training to box and stuff like that. They didn't have the YouTube career and everything like that, or the Disney Channel career before and stuff. They're not playing at boxing. This is really their life. And I could easily see that Jake Paul using this as an excuse to duck him and everything like that. So at the end of the day, I think Jake Paul canceling the fight because of his weight is a bunch of bullshit. I think him canceling the fight against Tommy Fury was a bunch of bullshit. I think it's just a convenient excuse to duck them and stuff like that. Lack of ticket sales, whatever it is, it's just a convenient excuse to put on the other guy so Jake Paul doesn't look bad. I'd be, and at this point, I'm surprised that people are still lining up to box the kid, simply because there's not a whole lot to gain from beating Jake Paul in a boxing match, other than the fact that you get some money. You know what I mean? And if that's what they're doing it for, that's cool. You know what I mean? Ben Askren came out and said some shit, made some excuse about why he took the fighters. It's like, dude, you should have just said you took it for the money. You know what I mean? Like, everything else outside of that is a bunch of bullshit. You took the fight because you needed the money. Same with Tyron Woodley. There was no upside to winning. They weren't going to get it. They weren't going to, get some milestone. Jake Paul is not a big name in the fighting world. Their guys are not top talent is not lining up to fight him. You know what I mean? Like, the only reason anybody wants to fight him is the only reason any top name wants to fight him, retired or active, is because he's playing at boxing, and they know that, and they want to expose him, but they don't want to risk too much in doing so. So yeah, that's enough about that. Brittney Griner, has been in the headlines pretty consistently since she's been detained in Russia. A lot of people are making it about the fact that she's black, she's lesbian, she's a political prisoner. It's all a load of shit, okay, folks? Like, let's calm down and stop acting like she didn't break a law in another country. She brought illegal substances to a foreign country and stuff like that, regardless of whether she had Russia does not have to uphold American law. She's not a diplomat. She's over there playing a sport, collecting a paycheck, working and stuff like that. So they probably gave her a work visa or some sort of permit to come into the country, to come and go to the country and stay long periods of time and stuff like that. I mean, so for her to be like, oh, I didn't know, or show me, people should get me out of here because I'm a celebrity and blah, 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 blah. There's a white guy who's incarcerated in Russia for pretty much the same thing, bringing in drugs and stuff like that. But no one's talking about him. No one's saying anything about him. No one's sitting there going, oh, let's get him out. But yet people want to go, oh, if Brittney Griner was LeBron James, they would have him home in a heartbeat. So let's not play these games and try to throw in politics. She broke a law. It's just like if you drove from a state where weed is illegal to a state where weed is illegal, you could get in trouble. Just like I said, just because the federal government has decriminalized it or whatever it is that people think makes them feel like, oh, I should be able to go from my state where it's legal to a state where it's illegal and be able to do it as much as I want and not get in trouble, or do it wherever I want and not get in trouble. Like I said, that's foolish. It's nonsense. And the same thing applies to Brittney Griner going to Russia. She should have known what the laws were. She should have been very careful to make sure that she wasn't breaking any laws or doing anything illegal and everything like that. And yeah, do I believe that Russia should give her some leniency? Sure. Deplore her and tell her she can't come back to the country. She cannot play basketball in Russia ever again. Problem solved. Right? But at the end of the day, it's not up to us to decide what Russians do with Russian law. If it's weed is illegal over there, if THC substance is illegal over there, that's a controlled substance. She brought it into the country. That's her own fault. Whether she forgot or whether she's claiming ignorance, whatever the case may be, you can't sit there and say, oh, well, I did it before, I got away with it before, so why am I not getting away with it now? Blah 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 blah. Like, that doesn't fly. And I wish people would stop bringing in the fact that she's a lesbian or that she's black or this, that, and the third and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, she broke a fucking law in another country. Do I feel bad that she broke that law in a country that doesn't have good relations with us and they're probably going to can throw her in jail for 10 years and shit like that? Yeah, I feel bad for that aspect, but at the same time, it's like I can only feel but so bad because she was traveling to another country. She should have known the law. She should have known better. Somebody on her team should have been making sure that she was aware of what was going on. I believe her girlfriend or wife is a lawyer or some shit like that. So it's like, at the end of the day, I'm not understanding why the government even needs to be involved. You broke a law in another country, deal with the consequences. And I understand somebody might drag me for saying that, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. If she was, like I said, if she got caught driving from California where it's legal with a pound of marijuana to a state where it's not illegal, I would be saying the same shit. She traveled across state lines to a state where the drug is illegal and stuff like that is a controlled substance, and she deserves every bit of punishment she's getting. Because, like I said, it's not illegal. It's not legal on a federal level. The federal government hasn't said, "Oh, it's legal to smoke weed in the continental United States of America." They have left it up to the states to decide. And if you go to a state where it's punishable by jail time or a fine or something like that, but yeah, and it's up to each judge to make a decision on a ruling, right? It's up to a judge to to give a fair sentencing and stuff like that. So if you're from out of state and you get caught with pot, send them the fuck home and tell them you can't come back to the state, or fine them and then tell them they gotta stay out of the state or stop bringing the shit into the state, whatever it is and stuff like that. Do I believe that people deserve jail time over marijuana? No. Surely not. I believe that marijuana should be 100% legal for people to do recreationally. They allow people to drink and carry on and do whatever the fuck it is that they want to do and stuff like that. Get drunk every night, get blackout drunk on the weekends, and be functional alcoholics and stuff like that. So why is it that there's still stigma around potheads? Alcoholics are worse than potheads. Alcoholism kills more people per year than marijuana, than people who are addicted to marijuana. So at the end of the day, all of this stuff is just a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of bullshit, and I wish it would stop. Like I said, stop bringing the politics into it. Stop bringing the fact that she's lesbian or that she's black. It has nothing to do with any of that shit. She broke a law in a country where it's illegal and stuff like that, and she has to suffer. She has to pay the consequences. She has to pay that toll. All right. So back to combat sports. Nate Diaz's final fight in the UFC is going to be against Khamzat Chimaev. I cannot pronounce that man's name to save my life. And there are some fighters, notably Leon Edwards, who think this fight is a bad matchup for Nate Diaz. And I mean, I don't necessarily see it as a bad matchup, because if Nate Diaz was going to stick around, he was probably going to have to fight the man anyway. And so, I'm just glad that Nate Diaz is getting that final deal on his fight so he can be free of his contract to go do whatever he wants. You know what I mean? If he wants to keep fighting in mixed martial arts and go to another promotion, or if he wants to do boxing and stuff like that, good for him. I'm glad that he's getting that last fight out of the way. But I don't really see an upside for him winning this fight. It's his fight riding off into the sunset. If he beats him, people are going to be like, wow, he's still in great shape, great form. Maybe he could have made one more title run and stuff like that. And then if he loses, all he did was give Khamzat a big name, a stepping stone win. You know what I mean? A big name under a notch on his belt. So at the end of the day, I could see it being a bad matchup for that reason. But Nate Diaz is a fighter. He's a brawler. That man's going to go out there and give his all to the fight and everything like that. And, I think it's a slap in the face from Leon Edwards, somebody who competed against Nate Diaz, to say that, it's an unfair fight or it's a bad matchup. You know what I mean? Leon Edwards got in the ring with him, and he knows that Nate Diaz is a dog. Anybody who's gotten in the ring with Nate Diaz knows that Nate Diaz is a dog, and he's going to fight till he can't fight no more, or until the bell rings, or until he puts you out. So at the end of the day, I don't necessarily see it as a bad matchup as, physicality goes and stuff like that. Nate Diaz has a great striking game. He has a great ground game, and he's a great mixed martial artist. So I feel like it's a good matchup in that regard. Maybe Nate Diaz is a little bit long in the tooth, but at the same time, it's like if he were going to continue his career, he would have to fight this man at some point in time. So, I think it's an okay matchup. I just wish it was it wasn't his final fight in the UFC. I wish he was still making another title run, because if he wins this fight, I do believe he has some validity to say that he deserves, another shot at the belt in that weight division and then retire. But at the end of the day, I'm not the biggest Diaz brothers fans. I think they're cocky guys. I think they're very arrogant guys and stuff like that. But, you have to have that attitude, that mindset. I mean, they do seem very humble and everything like that, but they just always rub me the wrong way with their attitude and their cockiness and their just belligerence and stuff like that. I believe that there's a level, there's a way that you can be that, but also be a lot more respectable and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I just feel like, that's just the way they rub me personally. So football's coming back real soon, and you guys know I'm a Giants fan. And I saw this interesting question. It said, which New York Giant is under more scrutiny or pressure this season, Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley? I think it's an interesting question because Saquon Barkley has not performed up to Saquon Barkley standards. When we talk about it, I mean, he's had some injuries and things like that, and he just hasn't played well over the team. He hasn't played well overall, and some could say that's due to the factors of the team. Some could say that he's carrying the ball too much. They're using him as a workhorse and everything like that. To kind of cover the gaping holes in the offense. And Daniel Jones has just been an underwhelming quarterback since he's been a starter. I've been against Daniel Jones since the day he was drafted. I've never found him I saw him play at Duke one time. I wasn't impressed. And when the Giants announced that they were drafting him third overall, I was very upset because there was way better talent at that point. They could have, like I said, and they still had Eli around that time. Them picking up Daniel Jones is what I believe forced Eli out the door. And Mara even said as much. That Eli got a raw deal. I believe that Eli still had another 2-3 years left in him. All the Giants needed to do was really put some talent around him and really give him an opportunity to play the brand of football that he could play. I'm not saying that Eli was going to be, dropping, 60-yard bombs and everything like that, but he definitely could still throw the ball 30 yards pretty hard. Those short passes and stuff like that could have been his bread and butter, especially with those quick slants and receiver, more of a West Coast offense, short passes, running game and stuff like that. Eli was good at getting the ball out quickly and stuff. So at the end of the day, I believe he got a raw deal, so I was against Daniel Jones the whole time. And I just haven't been impressed with Daniel Jones overall. So which Giant do I think is under more scrutiny? I definitely believe it's more so Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley is a tremendous talent, and he's been injured for 2 out of the last 3 seasons, and he's dealt with some major injuries, leg injuries and stuff like that. And it's hard to come back from those injuries because you have to work. Because especially with knee injuries and calf and ankle and quads and stuff, when they keep you out for extended periods of time, you have to regain that strength in that leg. You have to get back used to planting on it, cutting on it, and stuff like that, getting it back to full strength. And that's something that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially when you've been out for an entire season and all you've been doing is working out and stuff like that. It's different working out and running just for the sake of running than it is to be out there actually putting all your weight on a plant foot and doing a cut and a spin move. And not to mention that even if Saquon Barkley does stay healthy this entire season, he's still going to be a threat on. And if Saquon Barkley does stay healthy this whole season, he's going to be a threat on the field, right? Whether carrying the ball or catching it out of the backfield. And if they find another running back to complement Saquon Barkley to kind of limit the amount of touches he gets and the amount of times he gets banged up, he can still, make some good plays and big plays and stuff like that. So I think that, Daniel Jones is definitely going to be in the hot seat this season. I believe that, it might not even be mid-season before the Giants decide that they need to make a change at quarterback and shake things up and stuff like that. I believe that, I firmly believe that if Daniel Jones does not light it up this season, he will not be back with the Giants next season. I believe that they'll make a move to get rid of him or just let his contract expire. And they'll move on and look for somebody else. He's pretty much just a placeholder at this point, in my opinion. And whereas Saquon Barkley, if he performs well, even if Saquon Barkley doesn't perform the best, but he stays healthy this season, the Giants can still use him next season and hope that he improves off of being healthy for one full season and getting that momentum back. Whereas if Daniel Jones doesn't has continuously performed underperform and stuff like that in this season, if he continues to, it might not even be mid-season before they make that change and move on from him. Like I said, I'm not even throwing a trade before the deadline out of the realm of possibility if he's still performing at an underwhelming rate. Marlins pitcher Daniel Castano got hit with a 104-mile-an-hour line drive ball a couple days ago. And it was very scary. I saw the video of it, and the ball, hit him so hard that it bounced up and actually flew up into the air. And I believe it was the shortstop or third baseman, maybe second baseman, somebody in that area actually caught the ball for the out and everything like that. And he was down, and you could tell, he was visibly hurt. What really saved him was the brim of the bill of his hat like, blunting some of that impact. I mean, I can't imagine that at 104 miles an hour that the brim of that cap did a whole lot to blunt the damage. But he was, visibly shaken up. They said he was out of it. He felt tired. He had a mild concussion, and there was a bruise, maybe even a little bit of a cut on his head and stuff like that. And it was a very scary play. And it raises that question. How is baseball going to keep these pitchers safe? Because while getting hit with a line drive pitch or a pitch coming directly back at you doesn't necessarily happen enough to warrant a major overhaul of the game, it does warrant, people to look into some options to keep baseball players safer and stuff like that. I know some people suggested a foam hat or something like that. There was like a foam hat or something like that they suggested, or some sort of helmet to help these pitchers and stuff like that. I definitely think it should be one of the next things that baseball looks to help to improve, because, when a ball is coming at you 104 miles an hour, you have very little time to react. And if you watch the video, there is clips of it online. You can see that he literally had almost no time to react when the ball went right back at him. Even if you can react, your reflexes might not be fast enough to catch it. I know you see those plays where baseball players, get that, like, drop down to the ground and throw their arm up in the air and the ball goes right into their glove and stuff like that. I know that those plays happen, or, the guy catches it, the pitcher catches it, but that's not going to happen all the time, and that is very dangerous to get hit in the head with a pitch that hard. You can crack somebody's skull, and it can all lead to death and stuff like that. So I definitely feel like there needs to be a huge push on how to protect those pitchers, because they are definitely in harm's way when those balls come flying directly back at them. I don't necessarily have any insight on how to protect them outside of, maybe that practice netting that they use when they're at practice. Have pitchers throwing from behind that way, they're not necessarily having that ball fly directly at them and stuff like that at 104 miles an hour. Now, I understand that might cause problems because it's an obstruction if the ball flies at them, or if it flies in that direction and it hits that thing. But it's like, I don't believe that it'll hit that netting enough to where it'll impact the game, because if you notice, pitchers aren't getting hit by balls almost every game. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of pitchers, like, when you see that, it's kind of one of those freak plays and stuff. So at the end of the day, like, I definitely feel like that could be at least a temporary solution, or something that they could look into to help pitchers, be up there and play the game safely and stuff like that. I mean, like I said, it might lead to a few more on bases when that ball gets hit like that, or, but at the end of the day, I mean, we have to find some way to make pitchers a little bit safer. So J.R. Smith says that he's shocked that Damian Lillard wants to stay and rot in Portland, is the term he used. And, I feel like J.R. Smith is the last person who should be commenting on where somebody's going to rot, because especially when it comes to Damian Lillard, especially when it comes to a talent like Damian Lillard, like, J.R. Smith did not have a notable career. I can almost certainly guarantee you in 10, 15 years, no one's going to be talking about J.R. Smith's contributions to the championship rings that he won with LeBron James, right? Like, nobody's going to be sitting there going, oh, yeah, he was a critical part of that team, blah, 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 blah. No. He made errors. He made mistakes. He did not have a prolific career. J.R. Smith was talented and could play basketball, is all anybody could say about his career. He's not going to go down in history as one of the greats, one of the best, and stuff like that. So for him to comment on Dame Lillard's career choices and stuff like that, to me, is just foolish. Dame Lillard's had a great career, and while he hasn't had a championship, he's still revered as one of the superstar talents in the league. He's still one of the most coveted players in the league. Almost any team would kill to have Dame Lillard to bring in Dame Lillard, because he's a monumental talent. And I think, it speaks to his level of character and his level of competitiveness, the fact that he wants to stay with the team that gave him his chance in the NBA. And he's not been rewarded. He's been compensated more than generously for staying there and being the face of that franchise and stuff like that. And, while he and I hope he does get a ring, and, if it never happens for him, he's still going to go down as one of the greats like Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, there are tons of great professional basketball players out there who retired without ever winning a championship ring and stuff like that. And Dame Lillard can still make the Hall of Fame. He's still going to be talked about for years to come. He's still going to be one of the faces of the Portland Trail Blazers even after he retires. You know, his contributions to that team, to the NBA, to the league, they're not going to be forgotten. Whereas J.R. Smith is going to be irrelevant in a few years, right? Like, no one's going to be talking about J.R. Smith. They're going to be talking, you remember Dame Lillard? Man, I wish he would have made a trade and stuff like that. But like I said, that speaks to his level of competitiveness because he does not want to go join up with the people he's competing against. He's not LeBron James. He's not Kevin Durant. He does not just want to join up with another team so that way they can dominate the league and have an easy ride to a championship. He's a competitor, just like Michael Jordan, just like Kobe Bryant. These guys didn't want to join and form some super team and everything like that. If he couldn't win on his team, then the team needed to do better to get more players around him. Now, I understand some people were like, oh, well, the Lakers had Shaquille O'Neal and blah, 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 blah. The thing is that Shaquille O'Neal was a superstar for the New Orlando Magic, who was, I believe, a free agent or was acquired in a trade. And this was before, quote, unquote, super teams, right? Shaquille O'Neal was a superstar. Kobe Bryant was a superstar. They paired them up. And this wasn't considered a super team because it was those two who were running shot on everybody. Kobe Bryant wouldn't have won all those rings without Shaq. Shaq was a dominating force when he was a dominating force in his prime and stuff like that, and he was just a monumental talent. Do I consider that Lakers team a super team? No. It was a fantastic Lakers team. It was a great team, but it's not a super team. It's not Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. It's not LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook. Right? And I know people will be like, oh, well, when he had Pau Gasol and blah, 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 and this, that, and the third and stuff like that, you keep throwing in all these big superstar names and everything, but you look at the roster, they had players around two central figures, two of the stars. Kobe Bryant was the star of the show. He had one, maybe two supporting cast members who were notable, but everybody else was just supporting cast. They were all role players who were good at that. And Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, all those guys who had these great teammates, they built them into something. Do I believe that Shaquille O'Neal, if he had stayed with the Orlando Magic, he would have carried them to a championship title? No, I do not. He needed another player. Shaq knew his role on the team. Kobe knew his role on the team. They both became in and they were superstars. Obviously, they started to clash, which is why Shaq ended up having to leave and Kobe ended up staying. Kobe ended up taking a team to a championship 2 more times after Shaq left. So at the end of the day, like I said, J.R. Smith talking about Dame Lillard not wanting to move, that just speaks to Dame Lillard's level of competitiveness. He's not willing to take the easy road to get a championship. Michael Jordan didn't do that. Kobe Bryant didn't do that. These guys stayed on their teams and told their teams, find me talent so I can win a championship. And that's what they did. So, next up, talking about National Women's Soccer League player Jalene Daniels and her sitting out over the refusal to wear the Pride jerseys. Now, she cited religious reasons and said, oh, I have deep love for everybody and stuff like that, and I think she's full of shit. You can't say that you have deep love for everybody when you are willing to sit out of uplifting a marginalized group of people. How can you sit there and say that you have deep love for everybody, but then say, oh, I don't want to support Pride Month or I don't want to support the LGBTQ community because it goes against my religious beliefs? You can't have deep love for people and be like, I don't believe in your lifestyle. I'm not going to support you and help you live your best life. Right? So I think she's full of shit. I don't think she has deep love for everybody. I think she's just a simple bigot like everybody else. I think she's like everybody else who says, oh, I don't believe in the LGBTQ community, this, trans people, that, blah, 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 all the bullshit, right? Like all the excuses that people give for not wanting to help uplift those groups of people and stuff like that, to me, they're all just full of shit. They're all just justifying their bigotry with some technicality or some fucking dumb reason and stuff like that. And in my opinion, you know, it makes for a bad teammate. It's like, how does that make the lesbians on her team feel? Right? Like, oh, you're going to sit out of a game and risk us losing this game. Like, I'm not saying it's an important game or a big game or anything like that, but every competitor wants to win. No one wants to lose. So if she's a starter and she's like, well, I'm not playing because I don't want to wear this jersey with a rainbow flag on it, or I don't want to wear this rainbow jersey and stuff like that because I'm not down with the gay people and stuff like that. How does that make teammates feel? Right? Like, that if I was her teammate and I was gay, I know I wouldn't want to play with her no more. And people are like, oh, well, it's just business. It's not just business. It's like I'm playing. You want me to play with somebody who would go out and vote for a politician or support a politician who would take my right away to be married and be gay and to not be discriminated against? So at the end of the day, I mean, I understand that people have different viewpoints and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, we live in 2020. If you are not going to be supportive of the gay community and stuff like that for whatever reason, whether it's your religion or you're just a bigot, that's it. You can't sit here and say you have deep love for people and stuff like that and that this, that, and the third, but then also go, well, yeah, they're going to hell because they're gay. That makes zero sense. And speaking of women's sports, in my last little bit here, I saw Bill Burr's new stand-up, and he talked a little bit about women's sports, and he talked about how, it's kind of ridiculous. He made the gist of it was that it's ridiculous that women get mad at men for not watching men's sports when women don't even watch women's sports, right? Like, and I mentioned this a few episodes ago that women should not be mad at men for the lack of interest in their sport. They should be mad at the people doing the marketing. They should be mad at the people who are responsible for growing the league and growing the brand. Because the truth of the matter is they pay all these people to do all this market research and how to expand the brand and everything like that. And the problem is that they're missing the point. They're missing the point. They're not expanding the brand. They're not going out and beating what women are watching on television. Right? Like, women's sports is for the women market. Men have men's sports. And there are tons of men's sports to watch. It's not our responsibility to make women's sports successful. It's not our sport. It's not our responsibility to be interested in women's sports. People are like, oh, if you watch men's basketball, you should be able to watch women's basketball. And it's like, we watch men's basketball because it's exciting. Women don't dunk. They sit there and use all the fundamentals. It's like watching a fucking college, or it's like watching a high school game. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful because women can ball and everything like that and they can hoop and stuff, but do I believe that they're hooping at the same skill level as men? No. They're just not. The men's game is so much faster. There's a lot more action. Dunking and stuff like that, all the high flying ability and stuff like that, all the stuff that goes on. It's like, it's boring watching women just keep running up and down the court doing layups and shooting jumpers and everything. And now say the same thing for men's basketball. When the dunks are what makes the game, what make you excited in the game, make you go yeah and stuff like that. Layups, they don't do it. They don't do it. So like I said in that podcast episode, women need to be mad at the people who are supposed to be expanding the brand and helping more women get interested in these sports and stuff like that, because women don't give a fuck about sports. I bet if I went out and I asked 100 women what their favorite sports team was, the majority of them would answer a men's sports team. Now, why is it our men's fault that women don't want to watch women's sports? Why is it our fault that women would rather watch the Real Housewives of whatever, or Keeping Up with the Kardashians, or RuPaul's Drag or whatever and stuff like that over women's basketball? Men's sports dominate the majority of men's sports time. I understand that the WNBA and the NBA are two different seasons and stuff like that, but there are other sports going on. Baseball's going on right now. Hockey's going on. Football's coming back. There's men's soccer. There's men's lacrosse. There's there's boxing, there's MMA, there's all types of men's sports that people are watching, that men are watching and stuff like that. So to sit there and be like, oh, it's man's fault that women it's men's fault that women's sports leagues aren't doing as well, that's bullshit. Women's sports leagues need to be marketed to women because that's the demographic. And I'm not saying that there aren't men who don't like watching women's sports. I like watching women's volleyball. I like watching female mixed martial artists. I like watching women's U.S. soccer. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit there and go watch 100% women's boxing and keep up with all the women boxers and stuff like that. Like there are too many men to keep up with, and then you want me to throw women on top of that? Right, you want me to keep up with, like I said, there's football season coming up, so during football season, I have to keep up with whatever women's sports going on too, on top of whatever men's sports is going on and stuff. Like, I don't understand. Women need to get more women interested in women's sports. There are more women in this country than there are men. If women watched women's sports as much as they watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians and all that other shit that's on TV, all that other reality trash that women watch and stuff like that, women's sports would be wildly more popular and marketable than men's sports. And that's the point that Bill Burr was making in his stand-up special, and it just validated what I was saying. It's not that we don't believe that women can't play sports at the same level. It's just we've got plenty of other sports to watch. Why are we going to watch women's sports? Just for the sake of parity? That makes zero sense. Women need to get into watching women's sports. Women need to build the interest and stuff like that. And there are ways to do that. It's like, I understand that not all WNBA players want to be pretty and be prissy and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that they can't go out and do, do a deal with Sephora, right? Because they do wear makeup at some point. No one's saying they got to wear a ton of makeup, just Sephora. I like their foundation. I like their eyeliner. I like their lipstick. I like their eyeshadow. I like their blush, whatever. It doesn't have to be girly or prissy. It doesn't have to be like super overly girly and stuff like that. Like I said, there's a demographic for that. They need to be in those. They need to be making those deals with those types of places, right? There are women who would like to model, right? Who do like looking pretty and are getting all dolled up. Find those women and use them on a campaign to get them in these makeup stores and get them in these places. That way, these women can relate. That way, more women can relate. Oh, she wears makeup and she's in the WNBA. Blah 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 blah. I got to catch a game. Start doing better, getting these WNBA players into movies, on TV and stuff like that, getting them into more into more roles, expanding the brand. There are ways to increase the number of women and girls who watch women's sports and stuff like that to make it better for women and get women that more money, because the money follows what women are watching. And that's the truth. That's the plain, simple truth. Anyway, I'm getting off my soapbox. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Definitely going to keep up with more episodes. Sorry for the long hiatus. Don't forget to check out the website. Check out my t-shirts. That Sports Podcast t-shirts comes in black and gray. Catch me next time, guys. Peace.